The sound of shoes echoed across the courthouse lobby, each step steady, confident, certain of its purpose. Then came the voice that sliced through the quiet like a blade. "Wrong room, sweetheart. Defendants wait outside." Officer Dawson didn't even look up from his clipboard when he said it. His tone dripped with arrogance, the kind that comes from too many years of unchecked authority. The woman paused. Calmly, she held up her visitor's pass. "I'm here for a pretrial briefing," she replied evenly. He laughed under his breath. "Sure you are. Let me guess. Child support hearing? Maybe your boyfriend's arraignment?" The lobby fell silent. Eyes turned. The woman's hand never shook. She simply said, "You're mistaken, officer." But the moment her words landed, his smirk widened. "You people are always mistaken." Then, without warning, he struck the badge from her hand. The slap echoed off marble walls. Her papers scattered like broken pride across the floor. She bent down slowly, gathering each page, eyes fixed on his badge. "Officer Dawson," she said quietly. "I won't forget that name." The narrator's voice enters, low and deliberate. He thought she was just another black woman out of place. But in less than 60 seconds, he'd discover that the woman he humiliated was someone he'd soon be forced to call. "Chief," cut to silence. Renee Porter arrived that morning dressed like purpose itself. Crisp navy suit, leather portfolio in hand, posture straight as justice. She had walked through that courthouse 100 times before, but never like this. Today, she came not just as a citizen, but as a woman with something to prove. Not to them, but to herself. Officer Dawson never saw that. All he saw was a black woman with confidence, and to men like him, confidence looked like threat. "Ma'am, this area's for legal personnel only," he barked. "I am legal personnel," she said, her tone composed. He snorted. "Right, and I'm the mayor." People in line shifted uncomfortably. Everyone recognized the pattern. The words might have been about rules, but the look in his eyes made the truth clear. When she offered her ID, he didn't even glance at it. Instead, he waved her toward the exit. "Security doesn't play with fake passes. Try your luck somewhere else." Her voice stayed soft. "That's an official government credential, Officer Dawson. I suggest you read it before making assumptions." That was when his temper broke. "Don't talk back to me!" he shouted. His hand shot out, striking her wrist, knocking the badge loose. The ID clattered across the marble floor. The crowd gasped. Renee inhaled slowly, every muscle in her face fighting the instinct to react. Instead, she crouched, picked up her badge, and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me why I'm here." The narrator speaks again. In that instant, power seemed one-sided, badge against dignity, uniform against skin. But the truth was, Officer Dawson had just written the first line of his own downfall. He stood there, chest puffed, self-satisfied. He didn't see the phone cameras raised behind him. He didn't hear the murmurs forming. Renee turned and walked away, not as a victim retreating, but as a storm gathering strength. Because some lessons in power don't happen in training rooms. They happen in public, in plain sight, when arrogance mistakes silence for weakness. And for Officer Dawson, silence was the sound of his career ending before it even began. By that afternoon, the video was everywhere, 15 seconds of humiliation captured on 3 different phones. But by morning, it had vanished. Internal Affairs called it a misunderstanding. Officer Dawson filed his report first. He wrote that the woman had been agitated, that she'd advanced aggressively, that he'd acted according to training and safety protocol. He'd used those phrases so many times, they rolled off his pen like habit. And habit, in his department, was armor. When the chief reviewed it, he didn't ask questions. He just nodded. "Good. Keep it professional next time, Mike. Professional." The word echoed like a punchline only the powerful could laugh at. Renee Porter spent the next day filing a formal complaint. She brought photos of the bruise that lingered on her wrist. The clerk barely looked up. "We'll be in touch," she said, stacking the form on a pile of forgotten promises. Weeks passed. No apology. No investigation. Just silence. The kind that tells you exactly what they think you're worth. But silence was Renee's favorite kind of answer. It meant they hadn't seen her coming. She spent those quiet nights reading policy manuals, case law, and internal procedure. Every regulation that Officer Dawson had hidden behind, she learned by heart. Every loophole he'd used, she memorized. When a journalist called asking for comment, she declined. "No statement," she said calmly. "I'll speak in court." People thought she was reckless, taking on a system that protected its own. But she wasn't reckless. She was deliberate, because Renee Porter wasn't just another citizen filing a complaint. She had written the training curriculum that officers like Dawson were supposed to follow. She'd spent years designing accountability programs for departments that never used them. The narrator's tone deepens, deliberate and controlled. He thought she'd vanish like all the others. But some storms don't fade. They study the sky, learn the winds, and wait for the right day to strike. 2 weeks later, the courthouse buzzed again. Same marble floors, same metal detectors, same officer adjusting his tie before the mirror. He still believed the system would protect him. He was half right. It had, until now, and as the bailiff called the case Porter versus Dawson. The man who once stood guard at the courtroom door finally realized he wasn't keeping anyone out anymore. He was the one being let in. To answer. The courtroom was colder than she remembered. Every sound seemed sharper. The shuffle of papers, the echo of heels, the heavy breath of a man who'd never thought he'd have to defend himself. Officer Dawson sat at the defendant's table, spine straight, uniform polished, his badge gleaming like armor. It was all part of the performance. To the jury, he looked like stability. To her, he looked like the past, refusing to learn. His lawyer stood first, speaking with a smoothness only money and arrogance can buy. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client is a decorated officer who has protected this courthouse for nearly 20 years. On the day in question, he was performing his duties when an unknown woman approached aggressively. The words unknown woman lingered in the air like a quiet insult. Renee sat at her table, pen in hand, unmoving. No lawyer beside her, no one speaking on her behalf. Just her calm breathing and the quiet confidence of someone who knew that truth didn't need volume, only patience. The defense continued. Voice rising, she refused to comply with standard procedures. And when Officer Dawson attempted to verify her identification, she became combative. He responded according to department protocol. Minimal, controlled force, minimal force, controlled, professional. The same phrases he'd written in 100 reports. The same lies the system had polished into policy. When his lawyer sat down, Dawson took the stand. He told his story with conviction, every sentence practiced, every pause perfectly timed for sympathy. He looked the jury in the eye and said, "I don't see race. I see behavior. I was just doing my job." The narrator's voice breaks in, steady and low. And in that moment, he believed it. Because when a lie is told long enough, even the liar starts to mistake it for truth. When it was her turn to question him, Renee didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Officer Dawson," she began, "you said you were following standard protocol. Could you tell the court which section of the courthouse manual authorizes you to strike a visitor for showing identification?" He hesitated. "Ma'am, I was defending myself." "From what?" she asked. From perceived aggression." "Perceived," she repeated slowly, letting the word hang in the air. "Meaning it existed only in your mind?" The defense objected, but the damage was done. A few jurors shifted in their seats. Renee smiled slightly and returned to her table. She wasn't finished. Not even close. The defense tried to regain control, presenting body cam footage that started just after the slap, Dawson's version of events. The jury watched in silence. The clip showed Renee stepping forward, no audio, just motion. It looked like aggression, until you realized what wasn't there. The sound. The insults. The trigger. The narrator enters again. He thought his story was airtight, his truth untouchable. But a lie, no matter how cleanly edited, still leaves fingerprints. Renee took a single note in her folder, then closed it softly. Her expression never changed. The judge called for a recess. Dawson leaned toward his lawyer, whispering with that same smirk he wore the day he hit her. "She's not going to win this," he muttered. "She's out of her depth." The lawyer nodded, half listening. Already convinced, neither of them noticed Renee glance at her watch, 1:45 p.m. She'd been waiting for that time all morning. And when she finally looked up, her eyes carried something the courtroom couldn't yet read, because what was about to enter that room at 2 p.m. wouldn't just change the case. It would change everything they thought they understood about power. The bailiff's voice cut through the low murmur. "Court is back in session." Renee rose, steady as sunrise. She had waited for this moment, not for vengeance, but for truth. The judge nodded. "Ms. Porter, you may proceed." "Thank you, Your Honor." Her voice was calm, but it carried weight. Every syllable told the jury that she was done defending herself. Now the facts would speak. "I have obtained security footage from the courthouse's main lobby, unedited." The defense froze. The judge leaned forward. "Unedited?" Renee opened the file. "Yes, Your Honor, pulled directly from the building's internal cameras. No omissions, no filters, no excuses." The narrator's tone drops to a hush. For the first time, the courtroom would see what power looked like when it believed no one was watching. The screen flickered to life. There was Dawson, laughing with another guard, phone in hand, relaxed, careless. Then Renee entered the frame. Professional, poised, visitor's pass already visible. No hostility, no aggression. Then came the words. Clear as day. "Wrong room, sweetheart. Defendants wait outside." The courtroom went silent. On screen, the officer struck her wrist. The slap echoed through the speakers. The jury gasped. Renee didn't move. She simply pressed pause. "This," she said quietly, "is the moment I was accused of aggression." The judge's expression hardened. The defense attorney shifted, stammering. "Objection! Context! Overruled!" the judge snapped. Renee resumed the playback. The video continued past the slap, showing her calmly retrieving her documents, reading the officer's name, and walking away without a single threatening gesture. Then she faced the jury. Officer Dawson's body cam footage began 15 seconds after this moment. "The portion you just saw, removed." The narrator again. 15 seconds. That's all it took to expose the difference between narrative and truth. Her next words landed like stones. "Your Honor, I also request entry of departmental emails obtained through public record. Messages showing that previous complaints against Officer Dawson were dismissed without investigation." Paper rustled. The judge's brow furrowed. Renee read aloud. "Dawson's methods may be questionable, but he gets results." Another line. "He keeps certain types from causing problems. Certain types." The courtroom could feel the meaning. Dawson's hands tightened into fists. His face drained of color. The lawyer whispered, "Don't react." But it was too late. The jury had already seen the man behind the badge. Renee looked down at her notes, then back up. In every one of his 27 incident reports, he used the phrase perceived threat. Not actual, perceived. That's not policing, that's profiling. The judge glanced at the clock. 1:58 p.m. Renee smiled faintly. "And right on schedule." A beat of silence. Then the narrator's low voice. "Because justice, when planned by patience, arrives exactly on time," Renee continued. "Your Honor, I have one final exhibit to submit, an official letter of appointment effective as of this morning. I ask that the court permit its introduction at precisely 2 p.m. The judge, puzzled but intrigued, nodded. "Very well. 2 minutes. The longest 2 minutes of Dawson's life." He stared at her, confusion turning slowly to fear. He didn't yet know what that letter contained, but he could feel it. Some truths don't arrive quietly. They arrive with rank, authority, and the full weight of justice behind them. And at 2 p.m., Officer Dawson was about to learn exactly who he had struck. The second hand reached 12. 2 o'clock. The courtroom doors opened with a slow, deliberate creak. Every head turned. A uniformed official stepped inside, followed by a man in a dark suit carrying a sealed folder. The bailiff stiffened. The judge looked up. The narrator's voice drops, deliberate and low. Justice has perfect timing. It walks in exactly when arrogance thinks it's untouchable. The suited man approached the bench, handed the folder to the judge, and spoke clearly. Your Honor, by order of the City Council and Police Commission, this document confirms the appointment of Dr. Renee Porter as the new Director of Police Oversight. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The judge blinked, stunned. Effective when? Effective immediately, the man replied. Renee rose from her seat. She removed her blazer, revealing a navy uniform beneath it, subtle silver insignia glinting under the courtroom lights. Officer Dawson's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Renee's voice was steady, almost gentle. Good afternoon, Officer Dawson. As of this morning, every officer in this jurisdiction, including you, reports directly to my office. The silence that followed felt endless. The narrator continues. In that single heartbeat, the world flipped. The man who had believed his badge made him untouchable now stood before the one person his badge could never protect him from. The judge cleared his throat. Miss Chief Porter, please proceed. Thank you, Your Honor. She turned to the jury. For weeks, I've been portrayed as a woman out of line, a problem to be handled. But I wasn't here seeking pity. I was here to show what unchecked power looks like and what accountability feels like. She faced Dawson again. Officer Dawson, in your file there are 15 complaints from citizens of color, all dismissed without review. Today that stops, he whispered. You set me up. No, she said quietly. You set yourself up. I just stopped moving out of your way. She opened a folder, each page a piece of his record. March 2018, verbal harassment. June 2019, unlawful search. December 2020, physical intimidation. Each one brushed aside. Each one the same pattern. He tried to speak, voice shaking. Chief, please. She raised a hand. You'll address me as ma'am in this courtroom. The jury stared. Even the defense attorney had no words. Renee continued, calm as ever. Effective immediately, Officer Dawson is suspended without pay, pending termination and internal review. His conduct reflects not just personal failure, but institutional rot. And as of this moment, that rot is being cut out. The narrator interjects softly, no shouting, no vengeance. Just authority so absolute it didn't need to raise its voice. Renee closed the file, met the judge's eyes, and said, Your Honor, the evidence shows misconduct, falsified reporting, and perjury under oath. The prosecution may proceed with criminal charges. The department will cooperate fully. The judge nodded slowly. So ordered, the bailiff stepped forward. Dawson stumbled as the cuffs closed around his wrists, the same sound he had heard 100 times, but never for himself. He looked up at her, desperate. What happens now? Renee's expression was unreadable. Now, she said, you learn the difference between power and purpose. As he was led away, she gathered her papers with quiet precision, the narrator's final line of the act. He had spent years teaching others that respect was something to demand. But the woman he tried to break taught him that real respect is something you earn, and she'd just taken his badge to prove it. Weeks passed. The story of the courtroom spread through the city like a spark catching dry grass. People replayed the video not for the slap anymore, but for the moment that followed, when the woman everyone underestimated stood tall in uniform and rewrote the meaning of accountability. Officer Dawson's trial moved quickly. For the first time in his career, every witness was heard, every report was read, and every excuse was stripped away. He was convicted of assault under color of authority and perjury, 18 months in federal custody. No badge, no pension, no more hiding behind the word procedure. But the story didn't end with his punishment. Renee Porter made sure of that. She stepped into her new office with the same calm grace she'd shown that first day in court. No celebration, no cameras, just determination. Her first order was simple. Every officer would complete anti-bias training and community trust certification before returning to duty. Her second, any complaint ignored in the last 5 years would be reopened and reviewed by a civilian board. The narrator's tone softens. Justice isn't revenge. It's correction. Within months, complaints against courthouse security dropped by half. Visitors spoke of being treated with dignity. Young recruits saw leadership that looked like them, sounded like them, and believed that the badge was a promise, not a weapon. One afternoon, Renee addressed a class of new cadets. "You wear this badge," she said, "not to prove authority, but to prove integrity. If the people don't trust you, the badge means nothing. Earn it every day." Applause filled the hall. But later, alone in her office, she looked at the framed visitor's pass she'd kept from that day, the one Dawson had knocked to the floor. It hung beside her commission certificate, two reminders of the same truth. "Respect doesn't come from rank," she whispered. "It comes from how you treat the people who have none." The narrator closes, warm but firm. Power can silence a voice, but it can't erase the truth. And sometimes the only way to change the system is to walk right into it and take the seat at the head of the table.